Good evening all, Mark Watson here from Melbourne, Australia, and welcome to Odisha Design Week. Currently an advisor to the Odisha Design Council and greatly appreciate Parish Chowdhury for allowing me to share my knowledge and my worldview on design, looking at heritage and smart cities, but effectively focusing in on experience design. So I shall now try and navigate very quickly to a PowerPoint, which will back up my worldview. Okay, so heritage and smart cities. I've been teaching at Deakin University in the subject of smart cities and urban development in the architecture faculty at Deakin University, and currently doing a PhD with them on the UNESCO Creative Cities Network in the classification of design cities. So some of that will come up in the conversation here. But first up is Bhubaneswar. I hope I spelt that right or pronounced it correctly. And smart cities. Interesting image here from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs from the Government of India. It's not what you think about a smart city. It's clever design and it's innovative and it's fresh, where they're looking at parks and playing equipment for citizens and kids. But smart cities, by and large, have been taken over by the Internet of Things and the IT industry, and that's where everyone gets a bit of a buzz and the confusion starts. So hopefully we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into where design cities and smart cities are heading. Lots of interest in smart cities. All the major consultancy groups are onto it. There's McKinsey, Global Institute, but I think India with your interest in smart cities, whether it be a greenfield, brownfield or greyfield development of smart cities. You've got most consultancy groups from all around the world having their input, and obviously we're interested in design having an equal input into that. So we'll see where that takes us into the near future. But there's lots of money in smart cities. This is the Smart City Council. So you can follow them on LinkedIn. It's got 14,861 members, this particular group, and they like to charge it for that experience. So to be a lead partner, you have to part with $20,000 US a year by the looks of it. So it's quite a powerful player and a stakeholder in the whole city development movement. So Australia and India has a keen interest. This is stuff from the Australian government and the Australia-India Council, a funding body that instigates and supports research and activity around, and obviously city transformation is a key area of interest from the Australian government's perspective. Australia obviously has a view to smart cities and incorporating that within their 15-year infrastructure plan. So you can read that and follow the links in the bottom of the page if you want to have a look at what Australia has got in mind for smart cities. But by and large, smart cities is largely seen as internet, IT, the collection of data, and using that data for the improvement of services and delivery. So with, for instance, motor traffic, if a set of traffic lights are synchronized in such a way that the major arterial flow through that highway or freeway, or not freeway, highway at least, because there's signals on it, that are coordinated. So if you're traveling towards a traffic light with a bank of traffic that will hit a green light at the appropriate time. You don't have to slow down. You can keep going through at the nominated speed, and that you would be tracked at that speed to the next red light, which would then turn green. That sort of activity is what we all associate with the Internet of Things. But other anecdotal evidence of smart design and smart inclusion within the city fabric are things like monitoring the how full a rubbish bin is. So it doesn't need to be emptied once a week on a regular basis. It can be identified and emptied only when necessary. So there is some benefits to it, and that's what we're all playing with largely around efficiencies. As to whether well, I'm assuming it improves the human experience of the built environment through that effort. So, but Internet of Things, things don't go all the way we planned. So Toronto and Google is a case in point. Sidewalks Labs is Google's main research arm. Toronto was identified as a place that they want to have some experiments, but it is with great personal sadness and disappointment that I share that Sidewalk Labs will no longer pursue the Quayside project in Toronto. So they haven't given up, but in this instance, they have pulled the plug, and we're yet to get a full story of why that actually happened. But some community resistance to being monitored and surveilled is obviously the greatest concern within the populace. But on the other hand, CCTV has been quite beneficial in maintaining and monitoring criminal activity and actually catching the perpetrators. So it's an open argument at this point in time. So yeah, greenfields, brownfields, and greyfields. So about 2010, Peter Newton wrote this from the Social Research Institute of Swinburne University here in Melbourne. So I'm looking at heritage. It's not really a greenfield. Greenfield is new, so heritage doesn't effectively buy into that. Brownfields are usually large areas of land which have probably been given over by another industry, where they had a large holding of land. So whether it be the armed services relinquishing land for use of public housing or housing in general, would be classified that. But greyfields probably largely where heritage lies. It's sort of a bricolage or an aquapuncture points within the built environment, that certain heritage buildings and heritage precincts exist within other infrastructures. So we'll probably be talking about greyfield activities and actions around heritage buildings. Yeah, so once again, Newton talks about that in a great online publication called The Conversation, where most academics get out and vent their ideas out there to the public. But yeah, looking at policy alternatives and land alternatives and arriving at green urbanization is the key benefit that we're looking to achieve around smart. So India's not ignorant of smart cities and major city developments, especially greenfield developments. I say greenfield in my ignorance. I don't know whether anything was bulldozed in the city of Chandigarh in Gujarat to replace the city. It's interesting that Le Corbusier was chosen as the architect to do this in the 50s. Obviously, you look at Paris with the maintenance of the old city of Paris and the new development of Paris, where most of the new buildings have been established to maintain the heritage and the look and the feel of a city. So when you compare that to London and things with the the various buildings that have occurred in the older structure and the established areas of London is a contentious point. So it's interesting to see with this example in Chandigarh that you are used to this greenfield development site. So where that takes us comes down to placemaking. I gave a paper in 1997 at a conference in Ireland called A Sense of Place. Some of the speakers there were Kent Bloomer and Charles Correa, Ben Kelly from London, Sato I'll get this right, Nakaoka from Japan was also speaking in the same plenary session that I was speaking in at this particular venue. We're starting to look at placemaking. It's a name which just started to come into to establishment in the lexicon of design, and from that I developed my thesis in my master's entitled Belonging. So it was an anthropological view on material culture that looked at place and that act of belonging, which led to me engaging from the areas of standard heritage, the reuse of old buildings, listed buildings, and converting that to museums. So I've worked on the initial installation of galleries within the established fabric of a Victorian era building in Geelong in the National Wool Museum. But through that research association, A Sense of Place, working with the people that have the greatest experience of place, especially here in Australia, was the Indigenous population. So I worked with the Victorian Indigenous population and developed a number of tourism and gallery initiatives through that. I did give a presentation in 2010, so I'm going to share this with you. 2011, I get this right. Victorian government sponsored a number of people to come across in their infrastructure trade mission. I talked about the experience economy, especially into heritage hotels. So when we think of experience, it's user experience is the IT phenomenon that's brought that forward. With design thinking, we're starting to talk about customer experience. But when we look at it from museums and the like, it's a very high-end application of designers being able to create experiences and control those experiences to a point where with museums, it's an educational experience that you're providing. So you're providing them information on certain aspects of their culture, be it scientific or be it natural history or the like. But people enter these places to have an experience, and that then forms an economy. So if you look at things like the opera, that's an experience. People pay a lot of money to go to the opera, so it forms a level of economy within societies. So I picked up on a document from Denmark, very creative people, the Scandinavians, and they were starting to include the experience economy and tying it to culture, so cultural industries, and understanding that there's a growth strategy that can be achieved within their particular country to service the local community, but also to engage internationals, to attract people to bring themselves and their money into the country. So I suppose that's where India is placed at this particular point in time. When we start to open up post-COVID, people are wanting to travel again. India, through their initiatives such as Make in India, are going to open up to major manufacturing. So going to be seeing a lot of internationals coming on board and wanting to learn more about India, and museums are well placed for that. So it's this mixture of PPP, public and private funding of the initiatives going forward, rather than just the government being the key source of financing for these things. With the public investment involved, it makes projects more actionable. So yes, so Denmark has obviously seen this nexus between public and private to speed up that delivery. But yeah, so a couple of snippets here, which I was talking about 10 years ago, about preservation of heritage buildings, databases, needed requirements, and yeah, how to look after heritage better. And that was 10 years ago. I don't know if that's greatly improved over this last little while, but as your economy grows, the Indian economy grows, we're expecting to see that there's going to need to be an investment in museums, cultural centres and the like, in order to inform a public. So when we look at your public, we look at work of Kiran Shinde. Dr. Kiran Shinde from La Trobe University, he was talking about different kinds of tourism within in India, and he was talking about religious pilgrimages, which is the major movement of bodies outside of their homes and work, places of work, to go somewhere within India. It's usually through pilgrimage and religious reasons, but with an emerging educated middle class with standard westernized jobs, as you would call it. There is a need and desire to take breaks at a certain time of year outside of religious holidays, and to recreate and to have a break from the work environment. So it's providing that level of activity. But the problem with heritage, especially with smart cities, is this mixing of old and new. So this is an example of Werribee Mansion here in Victoria. It's a Victorian era sandstone building, which is a private residence, which has been handed over after it turned to an educational facility, and then it was handed over to the state. So in order to develop that, as you can see in the top right-hand section there, it's a contemporary and modern extension, or a standalone building alongside of that. So it's quite empathic and sympathetic to the architecture, and not meant to detract from the built form of the Victorian heritage building. So also talked about the 4 categories of experience: entertainment, aesthetic, escapist, educational. All of these 4 are going to start to come into play in India, I'm assuming, if the new Indian elite, as some people are calling them, the educated middle class, are going to want to have this experiences at this set point of time, and it's up to design to step in and provide those levels of experience. So 5 key experience principles: theme the experience. So don't just have any old thing happen. Try and come up with a theme and build a storyline around it. Harmonize impressions with positive cues. So eliminate negative cues. Mix in memorabilia, and engage all 5 of the senses in doing so. So yeah, the cues, positive and negative, try to work those things through. It comes down to sense of place and the context around that particular place that you might need to work on, to not just work on the building, but you might need to work on the precinct to enhance that user experience or the visitor experience. So I was saying back in 2011, so what do you want, India, in terms of what you're going forward with the Mumbai, which is a proposal that was put forward. When I look at that now, having been to Barcelona, I see this on the beach at Barcelona. So it's the same style of building form, but it's obviously been enhanced with Indian design and relief. So is that what you want? I was also saying experience by numbers, franchising. So this is looking at who's making the most money with the best formula from a franchised perspective, and going out and buying a Marriott franchise, or buying a Best Western franchise or whatnot, and building to that cookie cutter style that is renowned. The Hilton Hotel is renowned for that. It's trying to provide a Western environment for Westerners to relax in while they're attending business in a foreign land, so they don't feel alienated from the experience, which is counter to what we want to do. We want to, as designers, allow people in a sense of place to get a sense of that place. So, or are you looking at heritage hotels? In this instance, was something that was being put forward. So that's a conversation that Indian designers need to have, potentially in link with international consultancies. So when I was giving a paper on that in Delhi, a young lady trotted up to me at the end of the speech, of the talk, and said, "You must come and meet my boss." So I figured that, yeah, that's okay, just a short drive away. I'll see if I can hire a car. Until I found out that I couldn't hire a car, and they wouldn't let me hire a car. And so I promptly went down to the hotel and booked a cab, and drove for 3 hours, and met up with this fellow, Amarnath, at Tijara Fort, south of Delhi. And we had lunch together, and we talked about developments in the heritage hotel industry. So very clever man. It's obviously looking for and sourcing non-listed monuments and heritage structures around the place, where he has freedom of movement to be able to build and extend and do what he needs to without rigorous adherence to government regulations around heritage restoration. But this is the mix that is out there. So Amarnath did come to Melbourne in Australia, and I did catch up with him for dinner after a talk at Melbourne University's Australia-India Institute. So other activities that I'd engaged in around placemaking, worked with ICSID, which is now World Design Organization, key body for industrial design. 2014, they staged a 2-week workshop with Wellingar Management School under Siddhartha Nedkani, and worked with a group of Indian designers around Matunga. Matunga is an interesting area in that it is a garden suburb of the early 1900 variety, where people were looking at the gardenisation and establishment of estate planning, where housing and whole urban areas were designed with an idea in mind of that experience, the human experience of that environment. So we looked at Matunga, and I was looking at the culture of Matunga. Was told that the culture of Matunga was a food market in Mumbai, and with that, looked at the comings and goings of food and produce within a particular area. Thought about other areas that had a similar remit. Was looking at Covent Garden in London, but also trying to think of the name of the railway station that was developed recently in the UK with a major commercial produce supermarket, high-end retail around food area. So I was looking at that particular opportunity. So I looked at a whole site there, which was the railway siding to the Central Railway workyards in Mumbai. And my proposal was to roof over that whole shunting yard, still allowing the trains to be able to access the underside and into the workshops at that, but it was creating a 3 or 4 story development on that particular site. We did note that there was a significant parrot that was native to the area, which was struggling amongst the lack of biodiversity within the Mumbai environment. So I sort of envisaged a large bird cage mesh enveloping the whole of the structure. So I envisaged it be greened out and accommodating. So this is the sense of place that we're looking at in terms of from design, experience design. Design is how we actually dig deeper and look for those opportunities for people to experience a more informed and knowledgeable understanding of an area and get a better sense of place. So yeah, using design thinking, that workshop proposal or activity around impact and action, working on using design thinking methodologies as social science research. I was teaching in that subject at the University of Melbourne Architecture, called Building the Brief, looking at architecture and building students, really understanding that they need to dig deep with research methods, using social science tools to find out what the user actually wants to generate a better experience for that activity. So once again, other heritage activities and engagement that I've had, met up with the heritage architect Vikas Dilawari in Mumbai, and looked through the Flora Fountain with him, and experienced my first trip on a Mumbai train, which wasn't too traumatic for me. It mustn't have been peak hour. But also gave a presentation on smart cities and heritage fusion in Ahmedabad at the Gujarat Technological University with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation as supporters. So there were some good outcomes that came from that. Impact is what we want to achieve. We actually want to see if we can take it beyond being an idea and doing it as designers doing, and make it actual. Yes, so talking at CII, I did put a call out to CII and the World Design Organization to see what we can do about that impact. And here I'm citing Ezio Manzini, where he's talking about design when everyone designs. So that's the public consultation and what's called participatory design. So I've worked with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals set up by the United Nations. Used to be the Millennial Goals, but they've rebranded it and given it more of a 2030 focus to meet everyone's growing concern over climate change. So working with the Digital Society School out of Amsterdam, I've been running the workshops with that program, both in Melbourne and Geelong for about the last 6 years. So yeah, working with a set process, helping people, non-designers as well as designers, understand the design process, the stages that you go through to develop a design and a concept. We're all familiar with the double diamond. So this is part of the process that I go through in my workshop to explain to people what it is we're going to do over a 4-day session, or 4 sessions in a 2-day workshop if we're doing that. And as most people are doing these days, they're trying to frame the structure of the activity around certain goals. So obviously SDG number 11, sustainable cities and communities, is a key input to that, and looking at the future around quality education, and that's tying museums in with number 11. But you can also tie into things like number 10, equities, inequalities. So museums being open to all the public. It's not just the educated middle class, but it's all part of that process of spreading the information and bringing everyone up and improving the lot of everyone's life. So, because they're all stakeholders, so this is one of the tools from the Amsterdam toolkit, which you can see at the link down the bottom. So if you follow that, you'll be able to find a whole heap of tools, social science tools there that designers utilize. Call it design thinking. Anyone can think in that methodological approach to it. But using these tools, we're able to interrogate and produce evidence. And using that evidence, we're then able to give a strongly informed projects going forward. So on the right-hand side is what I'm particularly interested in with my PhD research, largely looking at leadership. How can we work with administrators who are in charge of projects, funding and generation of, and the leadership there? How can we help them be more innovative? And through that, we have to build a design culture within organizations, not just designers, but non-designers need to understand how to be more creative and innovative. That's where design thinking comes in. I think they largely use the term design to make it sexy. It's more abductive thinking, which is the hybridization of research methods which you choose to interrogate the subject. So that is the design of design thinking, that you design a structure of research methods that you want to choose and research tools that you are going to utilize to find the evidence to inform your direction, not to verify your preconceived ideas, but to give you evidence-based design to move forward to substantiate your stance on a particular direction that you're taking a project. So likewise with the Venn diagram on the left-hand side, my left, is people, profit, planet, which was largely profit was the economic aspect of a project. Planet was the environment which came into play when people were starting to ask for environmental impact statements in budgets associated with development. So it wasn't just the bottom line, whether it made sense to make people money. It was as to whether it's going to do damage to the environment. That gave that a value. And then thirdly came on the triple bottom line is its impact on the social structure of the area. So people came into play. So is it bearable? Is it equitable? Is it viable? Therefore, is it sustainable? Is the key to that. Fourth one that is evolved of recent days, largely in relation to Indigenous populations. It's knowledge around culture. So the environmental, economic, and social are interplayed there, but fourth aspect is cultural. So museums are cultural institutions, and they have a role to educate and to facilitate development within society and the like. So culture is a strong area of interest in, particularly in terms of what I'm thinking of doing with my PhD research. It's creating that design culture and elevating everyone up to a point where everyone has a fair understanding of what we're all trying to do as a team, coming together on a project, and not just the designer coming up with the creative ideas, but everyone co-designing with design and designers. That's participatory design. Judith Gregory was one of the earlier people writing on that Scandinavian approach to what's called participatory design. That's getting the public involved, getting key stakeholders involved, getting their views on what is required to go forward. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. another key protagonist in that that has come up with a new terminology around transition design. So there's a bit of play going on between, is it transformative, which architects like because we want to be able to transform, change the form of particular projects that we have in mind. But by and large, most of the projects are a transition. So in the case of Geelong, the second largest city in the state of Victoria, here in Australia, they had the demise of the local manufacturing of cars here. So those industries shut down. The government no longer was supporting them in terms of funding to maintain jobs and a car industry in Australia. And with that retraction of funds, the car industries decided to close down. So Geelong was struggling for what to do. So in the first stages, they were talking about a transformative approach to Geelong, but by and large, they've opted for a transition, a change from one situation to another. So that's the scission part of situation to move a project forward. So heritage is something that is not so much in transition. Culture is in transition, but it's an evolution for mine. It's something that is maintained and is necessary to be maintained because you need to know where you came from in order to go forward. Is my particular outlook. So Terry Irwin from Cincinnati, I think, and Cameron Tonkinwise from Sydney here in Australia, link up with DESIS network, and I think Ezio Manzini has a strong hand in the DESIS network. So if you haven't heard of DESIS before, you might want to look them up and see if there's some way that your educational institutions might want to engage with DESIS. Yeah, so I'm currently running a paper at the moment on museum environments, looking at India. I'm calling it the experience economy and museum development in India, and I'm about to give a talk in early December in relation to that, based in Egypt. I won't be going to Egypt because of COVID, but it'll be an online presence, so you should look up that particular conference coming up in early December. It will be the same time as Odisha Design Week, so I don't want to steal the audience, so you need to look after the Odisha people first, but do have a look at that particular opportunity going forward. All right, so that's me. So hopefully that's been informative for you for experience design, a window on heritage and smart cities. So I shall catch you all later.